A really short history of the Norman Conquest of England by a man with a cat. Introduction. The Norman Conquest of England was that series of events during the latter part of the 11th century, by which a Norman duke was set on the throne of England, and was enabled to hand down the crown of England to his descendants. The Norman Conquest of England does in truth mean a great deal more than the mere transfer of the crown from one prince or one family to another, or even than the transfer of the crown from a prince born in the land to a prince who came from beyond the sea. It means a great number of changes of all kinds, which have made the history and state of England ever since very different from what they would have been if the Norman Conquest had never happened. The word conquest strictly means the winning or getting of anything, whether rightly or not, whether by force or not. This meaning of the word has something specially to do with the Norman Conquest of England. For when King William was called the Conqueror, it did not at first mean that he had won the crown of England by force, for he claimed it as his own by law. But though he claimed it as his own by law, he had in fact to win it by force. We can therefore rightly speak of the conquest and the conqueror in the sense which those words now commonly bear, that of winning a land and the rule over it by strength of war. Duke William claimed the crown as his own by law, but he could only get it by coming to England with an army and overthrowing and killing the king. And when he was called king, he had still to win the land bit by bit, often by hard fighting, before he truly had dominion of the whole kingdom. That Duke William claimed the English crown as his own by law, and yet had to win it in battle at the head of a foreign army, had a great deal to do with the special character of the Norman Conquest of England, and with the effect which that conquest has had on the history of England ever since. There have been at different times conquests of a very different kind. Sometimes a whole people has gone from one land to another. They have settled by force in a land where other men were dwelling, and have killed or driven out the men whom they found in the land, or have let them live on as slaves. Here is mere force without any pretence of right, and a conquest like this can happen only among people who are quite uncivilized, as the English were when they first came to the island of Britain. The Norman conquest was nothing at all like this. The English were neither killed, nor driven out, nor made slaves, but went on living in their own land as before. The descendants of the Normans, who settled in England, learned to speak English, and to have the feelings of Englishmen. The effect of the Norman Conquest of England was not to make England subject to Normandy, and it was not to make England a Norman land. The English were not driven out, nor turned into Normans. Instead, the Normans in England were turned into Englishmen, even as they changed the laws of England, and the language, manners and thoughts of the English. The English and the Normans. When the Normans crossed the sea to conquer England, the English had been much longer settled in the land which from them was called England, than the Normans had been in the land which from them was called Normandy. It was in the 5th century that the English began to settle in those parts of the Isle of Britain which from them took the name of England. But it was not until the beginning of the 10th century that the Normans settled in that part of the mainland of Gaul which from them took the name of Normandy. The English had thus been living for 600 years in their land, when the Normans had been living only about 150 years in theirs. The English, therefore, in the 11th century, were more thoroughly at home in England than the Normans were in Normandy. Among the English, the adventurous spirit of new settlers had spent itself in the long wars with the Welsh, which established the English dominion in Britain. But in the Normans that spirit was still quite fresh. Their conquest of England was only one, though it was the greatest of several conquests in foreign lands made by the Normans about this time. Both were brave, but the courage of the English was of the passive kind, with which men defend their own homes. The courage of the Normans was of the restless, ambitious kind, with which men go forth to...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?